Hello everybody, welcome to tonight's training. I'm going to give just a minute for folks to join, and while I do, I'll invite you, if you're watching the replay, to get comfortable. Maybe you want to light a candle, get a cup of tea. We're gonna go deep tonight on the topic of the inner critic, so I'd love to invite you to just get cozy. And I'm really looking forward to this topic. Hi everybody, welcome. We're just gonna give it a minute for some folks to join, get comfortable, and if you'd like to let me know where you're joining from or just say hello, would love to see you and hear from you. And we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to tonight's training. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Tonight we're going to be talking all about the inner critic. So if you have one, or if you're excited about this one too, let me know. If you don't already know me, my name is Ashley Perl. I am a certified trauma-informed transformation coach. So I really love helping sensitive individuals overcome anxiety and find some more balance and fulfillment in their lives and in their relationships. And no matter who I'm working with, there's always one thing that people tend to have in common. If you can guess what that is, that is that they all have an inner critic. We all have an inner critic, you guys. And I'm excited tonight to chat a little bit about what the inner critic actually is, why we all have one, if not several, and what we can actually do to heal it or quiet the inner critic. So if you're just joining, hello. We're gonna get into it. So let's talk about the inner critic, right? This voice that's in your head that's constantly having an opinion about everything and anything, right? Just think if you had a roommate that was constantly in your ear saying, oh, you're really gonna wear that? You're gonna do that? Did you just say that? Oh, you're so stupid, or you're not smart enough, or you're not pretty enough. Like all of these things that our inner critics say. And if you're here, let me know, like, what do you often hear from your inner critic, or when is it the loudest? If we had a roommate or someone next to us constantly doing that, we would not want to spend time with that person, right? We wouldn't want to be around that all the time. Yet we seem to just allow that to be the case in our heads, and we allow that to be okay. And I find that a lot of people think that this is just the way it is. Like, oh, it's my inner critic. It's always going to be there. And that's actually not really the case. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that tonight. Okay, so Sarah says I would set boundaries and give it to them. Yeah. So setting some boundaries with our inner critic. We're gonna talk about all of that tonight. So it's possible and it's likely that this voice that's constantly nagging you is making life a little less enjoyable. Wouldn't you say? I know when my inner critic used to be very, 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 very loud and opinionated, it would almost make every day a little bit harder than it needed to be. I would second guess every decision. I would second guess every choice that I made. I found that it was really hard to show up authentically because I was so afraid of, what was going to happen based on what my inner critic was saying to me. And so ultimately, I want to be able to provide you with some tangible tools, things you can begin doing today so that you can essentially live life with a little bit more ease and with a little bit more enjoyment and with less stress and anxiety and fear, so that you can be yourself fully, so that you can say the things you want to say, do the things you want to do, and feel really empowered while doing it, feel really confident while doing it. I know that though I can't see all of you, I know you all have so much to offer the world, and so it would be such a shame to let our inner critics take that away from us, okay? So what actually is the inner critic? Why do we have this voice in our heads? Well, a lot of people don't realize this, but the inner critic is actually a survival mechanism that evolutionarily humans developed. So just like if you think about if someone came behind me right now and said, like scared me, I would already be like running, right? Running away. I would look behind me. Maybe my heart would start pounding, like everything in my autonomic nervous system would like kick up into high gear because it would immediately know that it needed to keep me safe from something, right? Thank goodness that's not actually happening because I tend to scare easily. But just like that was something that humans developed, right, over time to stay safe. Our bodies learned to perceive danger. Well, the inner critic actually is kind of an offshoot of that. However, instead of a real threat to our like physical survival, the inner critic perceives a potential threat and tries to ward off this potential threat or danger. But often this is in ways that aren't really so helpful to us. And I'm going to explain why this even developed in the first place. I'm trying to think of an example here, but we'll get into it. So think about this. As we grow up, we are getting messages from all over the place. And when we're young and we're not fully developed yet, our brains, our minds are taking in and making meaning of all of these different messages that we're getting from our caretakers, from our siblings, from now, right, social media and the media, even religion or culture. I mean, messages are everywhere. And often these messages are dualistic, meaning they're very right-wrong, right? This is good, this is bad, or that's how our brains perceive them. So we might have not been told something explicitly when we were younger from a caretaker, but we made meaning of something perhaps our moms or dads or siblings said, and therefore created these deep-rooted beliefs about ourselves. So I'll give you an example. Perhaps growing up, you were very chatty, and someone once said to you, maybe dad once said to you, nice girls actually keep their thoughts to themselves, or you're never going to be in a relationship if you're constantly talking and things like that. And so we may, and yes, these are things that I've worked on with my clients, things that people have heard from the point that they were young. There's so many different messages. But so what happens then? That's a deep-rooted belief that's created. And then every single time, perhaps this person went to go speak up growing up and into adulthood, there was that voice that came on that said, better not. You better keep that opinion to yourself. They're gonna think you're too much. I hear this so much. I hear this so often that a lot of women feel like they're too much. And then at the same time, not enough. It's such an interesting thing, but this is where it comes from. And so that's just one example. And that inner critic will continue to prevent that person from speaking up, prevent that person from maybe sharing their true and authentic self, prevent that person from living life in a way where they're actually speaking their true thoughts. And that really takes a toll on somebody, okay? That is an example of how that particular inner critic voice can develop, okay? And if you can think about this, that the inner critic, earlier I mentioned that, it's actually looking to protect you in some way. It's something that developed to keep us safe, right? It thinks it's keeping us safe. It truly thinks that it's protecting you. Because if you speak up, there's a potential for danger. But that is something that, the young mind that didn't have the full understanding of life, that's the meaning it created about it, and that doesn't actually hold true, but the inner critic doesn't know that. And so that's important to remember, and we'll kind of get into how that's going to help us quiet the inner critic in a moment here. But essentially, all the parts of you that maybe you were led to believe were bad or wrong, the parts that were too much or too little, too loud, not smart enough, not funny enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, whatever meaning or belief you developed, parts of you that you were led to believe were bad or wrong, you essentially exiled those parts. You wanted to get rid of them so that you could protect yourself from losing love. And this is all happening subconsciously, you guys, but it's deep rooted. So if you can think about some of those like repeat phrases that your inner critic says to you, like what are the top 1 to 2, that's going to actually give you an insight into what are some of the core woundings that you have. But knowing this and bringing your awareness to it is going to be so helpful, because then you can begin to, heal from that place. So if you are starting to kind of learn something about yourself through this, which I hope you are, then that's the place that you begin, and that's where the healing begins. So it's great. So the inner critic is created to protect those parts of you, right? Those vulnerable parts of you. And it's really trying to protect those parts of you from being seen. The parts of you that don't feel lovable enough. Yeah, Steph, exactly. That's what you're learning about in IFS, internal family system. This is so related to that. The inner critic is truly a part. The inner critic is exactly that. And what Steph is referencing here, internal family systems, I've talked about it actually on my last training, I think a lot. It's one of the biggest things I bring into my work, because I find that it really, really helps people heal these parts of themselves that are keeping them from showing up in their fully expressed, authentic embodiment. And it's really, really beautiful. So now that we kind of know what the inner critic is, let's get into what we actually do about this. How can we actually quiet it down? And this actually does pull on some parts work as well. So Steph, you're gonna like this one, and hopefully everyone else will learn from it as well. So step 1, and for some reason I was going with alliteration here, is to separate and see. To separate and see. Your inner critic is not you. It is just a part of you. And that part of you was created for a very particular reason. And the minute you can separate from it and see it as such, see it for what exactly it is, you create spaciousness between you and it. And that's where healing and some change or transformation can begin. Where so many people get stuck, unfortunately, is they become so identified with this inner critic that they think it's them, like it's their own voice thinking these thoughts, and they can't separate from it. So they think that they're stuck. And I promise you, you are never, ever stuck, okay? What can help you in this initial first stage is to, when your inner critic is speaking, notice the inner critic that's speaking, and then notice the one, so notice the one that's critiquing, and then notice who's being criticized. And begin to notice, like, there are multiple parts of you that are at play here. And this is where we begin to have really interesting conversations and inner dialogue. It's so wonderful. Now, this might be a little bit hard to do at first on your own. It might be supportive to be guided in this, because self-coaching, self-guiding, it's a skill that we develop over time. But just meet yourself where you're at with it. So step number 1, separate and see. That brings us to step number 2. Once you've actually separated from it and have noticed that, okay, this inner critic is just a part of me. Next, we have to face it and feel it. Okay? So often people push down and suppress the inner critic voice, right? We just don't want to hear it. It's too painful, it's too hurtful, it's too mean. Like, why would we want to listen to that? But what we resist persists. And if we suppress it, it only is going to get stronger and louder. It's like the paradox of healing, but the minute you can actually feel into it, lean into it, that's where you can start to understand it and dissolve it. And so when I say feel it, like face it and feel it, the sensations that arise as you actually listen to what your inner critic says, that's very, very important in the process. We can't really skip that process. And I think that's where a lot of mindset focused work falls short, because we try to just think our way out of the inner critic. And the inner critic is so much more deep rooted and embedded in the body than just kind of thinking our way out of it. So perhaps if you've been trying that strategy and it isn't working for you, know that you're not doing anything wrong. You haven't like done the full process yet. So even though it might be uncomfortable, even if you've resisted feeling this in the past, I invite you to really sit with any emotion that comes forth when you listen to your inner critic, okay? Maybe you'd want to journal out what it says. Maybe you want to just, put 5 minutes on a timer and just listen. Like, what is that repeat sentence that it keeps saying to you? Like, oh, you're just not good enough. You're just not smart enough. You're never going to be X. Like all of these things, right, that our inner critics can say to us. And then notice what's happening in my body. I always close my eyes when I start to feel into the body, because it like takes away all the other things that can be distracting. But for you, you might be able to feel into it with your eyes open, whatever, Gesundheit. So feel into it fully and notice, like, what are you feeling? Can you track the sensations? And that leaning into the cycle of the emotion. I've talked about emotions a lot on here, how they just want to finish their cycle, and often they're starting to arise, and then we're like, no, push them down. Feel it fully, and the intensity will dissipate, okay? Number 3, that brings us to number 3, which is listen and learn, okay? When you stay with the feelings that arise when you listen to your inner critic, it can begin to help you access the words, the feelings, the memories when this protective mechanism first came online. And you can begin to resolve it a little bit. You can begin to pull some information and wisdom from it, which is going to be really helpful, because that's how we begin to disarm the inner critic, by listening to it, by understanding, like, what is the vulnerability here that the inner critic is trying to protect me from feeling? There's likely a pretty deep wound or a painful experience. You don't have to remember the memory or the experience in order to come to the resolve or heal this part. But understanding, like, what's the core need here that you were really wanting. So let's give an example here. Let's say that your inner critic gets really, really, really loud. I guess we'll use the example I pulled from earlier, right? When you're speaking your mind and you have been even maybe developing some throat pain. You notice you're always having some like strep or sickness in the throat. You're feeling like you always want to say something, but then you get too scared and you just shy away. And then you wonder, like, why don't people really know me? Or I'm so misunderstood. And these are just some stories that can arise. Well, in this situation here, giving the example I used from earlier, you might have spoken your mind when you were young, but you were told that's not good to do. That's not right. If you speak your mind, like maybe you got reprimanded for sharing, when you were younger, and it was painful. It was hard for your young self to kind of wrap your head around. And so subconsciously your body thought, speaking up is not okay. This is not safe. This is dangerous. We might lose love if we speak our minds. We might lose family, safety, the love of our parents, like whatever it is. And so that protector came online, and anytime you go to speak your mind, that inner critic now in adulthood comes. And so you might feel into that feeling and emotion, okay? You might realize, like, wow, all I really wanted ultimately here was to just be accepted for who I was. I want to be accepted and know that I'm safe no matter what I say and what I speak. And this is all, again, wisdom. Like that's the learning, okay? And that brings us to our final step, which is step 4. Okay, we separated and we saw, we faced it, we felt it, we listened, we learned, and now it's time to resource, resolve, and rewire. I told you I love alliteration. My inner critic can say what it wants about it. I love alliteration. It helps me remember. So once we begin to understand like why the inner critic is even acting the way it's acting, right? This is where we begin to kind of resolve it. It wanted to protect you from something that we don't actually need protection against. And this is where we get to bring in also our evolved self, maybe our soul self, our authentic self that knows, like, you didn't come here to stay quiet, or you didn't come here to not fully express as who you truly are, right? There's kind of like a drive in your soul perhaps to speak your truth. And that's why you're starting to notice, like, yeah, that inner critic just doesn't like have a place anymore here. I don't need it. But this takes a lot of like cultivating safety in the body. This takes a lot of learning how to self-resource, reparent. Oh, there's another R word. There's just so many. Learning how to create some of these things within your own self and body, the acceptance, the love, the approval, so that you actually don't need it from those around you, like maybe you thought you needed when you were young. Okay? And I'll name that another piece that's important here is just safety in the body in general. I talk about safety a lot. It is the core piece that needs to be there if any of this other work is going to work, for lack of a better word, or like take like effect or take hold. And here's the interesting thing: if you don't feel safe in your own body, these protective mechanisms, like the inner critic, for example, is going to even be on like hyperdrive. It's going to be at like level 100, because it's just going to be searching for safety in any place that it can get it. So begin to also cultivate safety in your body, and you might notice that the inner critic kind of quiets as a natural byproduct of that, which is pretty cool. So there you have it, 4 steps to quieting your inner critic. I'm so curious to know if this is something you've heard before, if this is new, like what piece stuck out to you most. And I will mention that you all have the power within your own selves to guide yourself through what I just shared with you. It is a skill, self-coaching, self-guiding. It's something that we can learn and develop over time. And I know for myself, it helped me to work with someone first and kind of be guided in it before learning how to do it on my own. But ultimately, I believe everyone should be empowered to learn how to do this. We all have bodies. We all have these protective mechanisms. We were never given those user manuals of like, hey, how do we even operate these things? And I believe everyone deserves to have that. So my wish for any of you watching this is that you begin to observe when your inner critic comes online. You begin to notice like, what are those repeat themes, and perhaps go through these steps that I shared today and see if you can notice a difference in how loud your inner critic is, how frequent you're hearing it, or perhaps you begin to just not really hear it at all. I can honestly say that my inner critic really doesn't come online that much at all. And if she does, it's just a sign for me to like look at my own, self-resourcing, or see where I may be outsourcing a sense of safety or approval from others. So good luck to all of you on that. Freda asks, how do you cultivate safety in your body? That is such a great question, Freda. I'm almost positive I did a full training on that specifically. So take a look at the OKclarity page, and I'll also, if you DM me, I'll be sure to send it to you if I find it. And if not, thank you for giving me a next topic to maybe share in the future. I definitely have talked about safety in all of my trainings I've done so far. There's quite a lot. So I'm going to send you to that for now, and we can definitely follow up as well. Steph says, some of my clients feel like they don't belong in their body. Yeah. So safety in the body, you guys, is such an important piece of this journey and this life. And unfortunately, a lot of us weren't really taught to experience having safety in our bodies, or we didn't experience environments when we were young that helped cultivate like physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety. So this is a big topic that I definitely can't do justice to just at the tail end of this training, but I'm glad that this is coming up, because this means that this is what naturally wants to be explored next. So stay tuned for future trainings that we'll do. And I'll put a little plug in here as well. Tomorrow in the morning, I guess if you're in the States, 8:30 Central, and then in the early evening in Israel time, I'm going to be leading another community breathwork practice. So 45 minutes, I'll be guiding you in just a seated up breathwork practice, and we're going to talk about safety in the body for sure. We'll be doing it next week as well on Tuesday, so be sure to check that out. You can find it with the link in my bio. Just sign up and you'll get the Zoom info link. And I think that's it. Thank you all so much for the questions, for being here, and I hope to see you on the next training. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.